the fact that it was able to walk a complete novice like me through writing a Python code
Right.
in order to do something that I didn't even know was possible. That was like, okay, this is a big deal. Hey everyone, welcome back to AI for Good. I'm Dylan Bose. I'm here with Sam Wheatley as always, and today we're going to talk about what AI is good at, what it's not so good at least for the moment, and how to tell the difference.
Great. So it might be helpful to think about this in terms of for our own selves, like what was it that made us suddenly think, oh, AI is really good. This is something that we should use. What was your first aha moment, Dylan?
Well, coming at it from a little bit of a strange angle, I think, because that's such a great question. But I remember the first time thinking this is going to change the world, possibly, was I got it to write some programming code to help me scrape the transcripts from my YouTube channel and then turn that into like a word association. Now, let me remind our listeners that I have zero business doing any coding whatsoever. And so, it was so funny because as I was going through the prompting back and forth, it kept telling me like, well, just put in the Arduino code for the blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And then it would say, okay, dummy, like, let's go back to the beginning. No, I'm just kidding. But it was,
it never calls you dummy. It's always very nice to you.
Yeah, it's always very nice. Yeah. But the fact that it was able to walk a complete novice like me through writing a Python code in order to do something that I didn't even know was possible, that was like, okay, this is a big deal. And that was right at the beginning. That was like November of whatever it was, 2023, 2022. Yeah. So how about you, Sam? Do you have a story like that?
Yeah, I think it was when we created our first custom GPT and we went through, I forget if we did this together or we did it sort of on our own, but I remember the first time of like going into the back end and putting in to the knowledge base, like the documents that I already had and PDFs and things like that. And then assigning it sort of a basic character, like you do this really well and da da da.
Yeah.
And then when I first started asking it for analysis of that information, like, hey, how would you rewrite this ad copy based on your knowledge?
Right.
And it started with very clear suggestions and insights and sort of patterns that would have taken me a lot of hours, just like you're saying with coding, to like actually go and read all those documents carefully, remember what I'd read.
Yeah.
It immediately saw connections with information within those documents that I had eluded me at first glance. And that's when I'm like, holy cow, I've got perfect memory now. I can put documents into this thing and just ask it, and it tells me exactly what's in the document and summarizes it or makes helpful connections. Now, I recognize this is one of the things that actually people complain most about LLMs or AI is like hallucinations and all that sort of stuff. What I think a lot of people don't realize is what you're doing when you encounter that sort of situation. You're asking the LLM to give you feedback on an enormous data set. And so it's trying to put too much information into a summary statement. And that's what gives you these hallucinations. Whereas when you define the data set very precisely, like here are 5 documents that I really want you to master and
Yep.
give me these insights about these 5 documents. It's extremely powerful.
Yeah. That's a great example of something it's good at, which is identifying the being able to synthesize and recall
Mhm.
from a very small set, even a big set of data, but like it's sort of a
Right.
matter of like finding out what that limit is. Yeah.
Right. Like bigger than your like it's bigger than a page, but less than the universe. Like I
Yeah.
think when
Right.
people are writing off, they write off the power of the tool because it's like asking it to sample the entire universe of human information. That's just
Yep.
too big. They're
Yep.
flying at 100,000 feet instead of like, I think it's very powerful when you're asking it just to fly at 20 or 30,000 feet.
Yeah. So it's almost like there are these three buckets. Like
Yeah, that's good.
bucket one is what it's good at just without even trying.
Yep.
And bucket two is what is good at as long as you sort of give it the right parameters or
Hmm.
limit the data set or whatever the inputs are. Like it requires a little bit of finesse and tuning on your part. That's bucket two. And
Yep.
then bucket three are just maybe things it's not good at all yet or ever will be possibly. And then maybe
Mm.
that's more of a philosophical or spiritual question, which we can get to. But let's talk more. Let's continue in bucket one and two, like
Yeah.
what it's good off right out the bat. Because one thing that what you said reminded me of, I just recently did this where we have this sort of library of content for one of the things that we're
Mm.
doing at our nonprofit, and we use some like different language that's sort of nuanced, that's not you know normal in the way that we talk about certain things. And
Hmm.
I asked one of our GPTs to identify the uncommon phrases that we use,
Mm.
come
Oh,
up with
that's
a
cool.
glossary. Yeah, I don't think I've even showed you this yet, but
Yeah.
I asked it to come up with a glossary of terms and phrases that we use that are different,
Mm.
and to explain why we use those phrases as opposed to others. And it was really really cool. So like the fact that it can survey all of
Hmm.
the text in our library
Yep.
and then find phrases that are it's saying these are not normal or like as common as other phrases.
Right.
So here's a unique phrase that you use. And then it's pulling in the context of why we talk about things a certain way and giving a description of why we use that phrase as opposed to something else. And that was like no work at all. I just said make this.
Right.
That was really really interesting.
Yeah. That sort of fits under the pattern recognition.
Yep.
Um, it's just extremely good at pattern recognition. And you have to
Right.
think about that as a broad category. Like what you're
Yep.
saying there is like, show me in this data set, these documents, are patterns,
Yep.
um, which under that similar category, something I did recently, because we've been interacting with these GPTs for like over a year now, pretty excessively. I do have some of the GPTs that I've been using for a year. And I ask it a question like, how can I improve my interaction with you?
Yep.
And it just spit out like 4 or 5 key ways for me to be better at
Hmm.
elucidating the information that I needed from that GPT. And I think what's interesting about that in this sort of pattern recognition is it's recognizing me as part of the pattern of things
Right.
I tend to do well or not do well. And it's able to give
Right.
me feedback that actually no human actually gives you accurate feedback like that. Like you can ask,
Right.
especially a custom GPT that you built, you can ask it for very frank feedback and it's going to give it to you because there's no emotional. It's like the Dr.
Yeah.
Spock, they're like, it
Yeah.
doesn't care what you think of it. It's
Yeah.
not worried about its job performance. It's not like shading things because it's worried about its
Yeah.
family of origin story or things like that. It just
Generational trauma. Yeah.
exactly. It just gives you the thing. And so
Yeah.
that's just really helpful when you're like, hey, I just really need to know what you think about this thing. And I will say out of the box, a lot of, if you're just using the LLM like OpenAI or
Hmm.
Claude or whatever, or Gemini, if you're just asking it like to the general prompt, it's going to give you a fairly anodyne or softer response than if you create a
Hmm.
custom GPT. When you create a custom
Yeah.
GPT, you can tell it like, hey, give me more harsh feedback, or don't be so
Yeah.
accommodating, or
Yeah.
give it to me straight here on this question.
Yeah.
And it'll remember that. Like one of the other questions I ask it is, what are some of the I ask about these patterns that you recognize? How could I improve? And I asked, well, what am I doing well in our collaboration? And it gave me some things and insights that like, oh, okay, now I'm seeing like um, it likes when I'm being curious, when I'm not being pedantic, or when I'm
Right.
understanding that it's trying to give me an answer to satisfy me. Like that's its operating code is to try to satisfy me.
Yeah.
And so that I'm sort of going a little far afield, but that's one of those things where the part of the feedback and training is understanding it's not just a
Yeah.
completed thing, it's
Yeah.
iterating and evolving as you interact with it. And so
Right.
this is maybe your middle bucket of giving it feedback.
Tuning it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's cool too how we learn how to interact with it based on that as well. It's like a back and forth
Mhm.
uh, tuning and training where it's training us and we're training it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's been crazy. I remember the first days of AI on social media, you'd see all these prompts to get exactly what you want from ChatGPT. And it's like, in some
Yeah.
ways, those are kind of silly. All you need to do is just ask GPT, like, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. What do I
Yeah.
need to tell you to get to that thing? And
Right.
or you could say, ask me a question one by one in order to accomplish this goal. And it'll ask
Yeah.
you the things that it needs to accomplish that goal effectively. In some ways, this
Right.
prompt engineering is a little bit of
Yeah.
a bait and switch if you just know how to ask GPT what you're looking for.
If nothing else, I think it will become more and more obsolete as the models get better and better at understanding
Right.
what you're asking for in the first place. So you don't have to do these kind of tricks and bells and whistles to get it to do what you want. You can
Right.
ask in plain language, I mean, I've even noticed, this is getting a little off topic too, but working with our automation
Mm.
schemes, like now there are AI prompt bot prompt text boxes to help you format your prompt for the so it's like this like multiple level thing, where it's sort of building the prompt for you. You can do that
Right.
with OpenAI's assistants, which I've been playing around a lot with. And so that's in the Zapier automation flow, they have AI copilot. So it's like,
Hmm.
if it's helping you craft what you want it to say, which is
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
I mean, this does kind of wrap around to your buckets of
Yeah.
easy, middle, and hard. I think what's happening in the market is companies are integrating
Yeah.
LLM technology and then sort of fine tuning for the end user
Yeah.
um, into their products. And so oftentimes, sometimes those are good and sometimes they don't work as well as just you doing it yourself. And so that's
Yeah.
part of the skill level development here is recognizing like, yeah, I can use the AI. Well, like I won't name names, but we use a note taking app. And I've noticed the AI built into the note taking app, even though it is based on Chat GPT,
Mhm.
is not as helpful as
Mm.
me just downloading the transcript into my own Chat
Right.
GPT and
Right.
doing the analysis that I was wanting to do.
Hmm.
Um, because they have made certain decisions about
Yeah.
that fine tuning that I don't like.
Yeah, and these companies may have rushed things to get them out of the
Mhm.
gate in order to like meet, board demands or things like that.
Right.
I could see it. It may sort of smooth out as time goes on a little bit. Maybe some of these things were par baked and weren't quite ready for mainstream, but
Par baked raw.
yeah, right, exactly. Uh,
um,
but yeah, so that again, like that just takes some experimentation with, and sometimes you're gonna try out a tool that you're like that seems
mhm,
promising, but you realize, okay, I'm not quite getting what I want here. I don't think it's me. I think it's
mhm.
it's just not quite ready for what I want it to do. You know.
Yeah. And so just if you're out there just getting started, don't be afraid of creating like within OpenAI or Claude or these other tools. Don't don't think you're not skilled enough to just create your own custom GPT to do what you want it to do. Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think where the market is going is a rush towards doing it for you that
Mm,
sometimes doesn't really accomplish just doing it yourself.
that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, and if you're having them do it for you, whether whatever software tool we're talking about, but there might
Mhm.
be they might want to box you in a bit more there than if you sort of learn the vernacular yourself and kind of
Yeah.
go directly through the actual model,
Yeah.
whatever tool, whatever, yeah, whatever AI tool you're using. But hmm.
All right. So easy things. It's pattern recognition.
Pattern recognition, yeah, that's huge. That's huge. That might be the number one, probably.
Mhm.
Honestly, I
And
was
sort of a
thinking another.
subset of that is also data analysis. If you give it a
Yep.
discrete data set, like a
Mm-hmm.
spreadsheet, like I'm able to, we track a lot of outcomes and KPIs. And so I'm able to take the spreadsheet where those KPIs and outcomes are and ask about, I just did this on, I did a regression analysis for the next 3 years on our projecting our
Awesome.
visitors to our website. Now, I took stats class in college. I do not know how to do a regression analysis, but I did remember, oh, there's this thing called regression analysis that you can do to predict future
Yeah.
outcomes. And so I did it and I just basically told ChatGPT, like, hey, take this. I downloaded the data into a PDF, uploaded that PDF into the chat that I was having,
Yep.
analyze this data and give me a projected regression analysis for the next 3 years on these pieces of data. And it did it.
Yep.
And then I thought it was too high. And I said, what would be a more conservative model, you know,
Mm,
if this is the top end model? And it gave me another set of projections, which was great. And so I did that
nice.
in like 5 minutes, but I
Yeah.
would have, there's no way I could even have done a regression analysis
Yeah.
myself previously.
That takes me to another idea I had, which is so we talked about pattern recognition.
Hmm.
This is kind of that as well, but it's also like um, basic, best practices or how to's or sort of like anything that has like a general consensus about what it should look like. I think the AI is pretty good about giving you that answer. So it's like,
Right.
um, yeah, like I mean, how to do a regression analysis includes the math part of it. So that's like an even like up leveled way of looking at it. But even something like, um, what are the components of an effective landing page for marketing?
Correct.
It's something that people have a general consensus about and you can play with or whatever, but there's a basic idea of what those elements are, and that's a great thing that it will tell you exactly what to
Hmm.
do, and then it can analyze your current landing page based on this outline that it gave you. So that's another example, like best
Yeah.
practices kind of things.
I mean, there's an infinite number of, there's an infinite number of these things. Like
Yeah.
any sort of expertise like that, you can start there with the easy, right? Like,
Yeah.
give me the baseline of what an effective landing page is. Then, if you're like, hey, I really like this
Yeah.
company's landing page,
Yeah.
take a screenshot of it, dump it in, and say, I want a landing page that looks like this or
Yeah.
has these it's even better when you say analyze this PDF of a landing page
Hmm.
into the core components that make it successful. It
Yeah.
gives you a list. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and this landing page I'm sending you is for toothpaste, and my industry is different. So make
Right,
sure you
right.
point out where that wouldn't be appropriate for my industry to use this technique or something.
Yeah, and so this is where you're starting this middle bucket of collaboration.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you're giving you're giving it something as a starting point. It's giving you feedback that's based on sort of best practices. Then you're able to start refining it on, hey, but I want to do this, or I'm in this kind of industry, or I have
Yep.
this kind of target market that I'm trying to develop for this landing page. What are colors that, you know, this
Yep.
audience really wants versus, you can go down all kinds of rabbit trails, but that's the
Yep.
part where you start iterating an idea really rapidly. And so
Yeah.
in the course of an hour, you've accomplished what might have taken you a week's worth of work previously.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's not
And
like you're
be
cheating. We've talked about this before. What you're
Yeah.
doing is you're pouring accelerant on the iteration process.
Yeah. Totally. And you're bringing and you're connecting you're like connecting the thread between these different elements that you are building upon in
Yep.
order to accomplish that task, because you're saying, remember, I asked you about this before, so like
Mhm.
in the context of that, I need you to add that context into this question that I'm asking you about this other part of what I'm trying to
Right.
do. And that's what's so powerful about it as well.
And then ultimately, you just build a customized GPT that sort of encapsulates that learning. And
Hmm.
so you can have a landing page bot that,
Yeah.
it has not only best practices, and then you could add to its knowledge. You come across like perhaps you take a course or something online, you take that course information, turn it into a
Yep.
PDF, store it in that bot's knowledge, and then it's always accessing that as part of your
Totally.
ongoing. And you don't have to totally remember all that stuff. It's just sort of it's an external drive for your memory.
I like that. That's perfect right there. Just make sure the cable connecting the drive to your brain is very high quality. You don't want that to
That's right.
fry. um, are there any other, what else? So we talked about pattern recognition. We talked about
Mhm.
best practices. I mean, maybe this is a little bit like best practices, but just anything that's like, how do I dot dot dot? I think I find a lot of success asking it that. Like,
Mhm.
how do I do this thing? Give me a step by step instruction manual.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd call that sort of knowledge acquisition. Um,
Hmm.
Using it as a teacher or a guide. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I want to, I create, like I want to understand how to use AI better, or like I
Hmm.
need to understand AI. You could just go to and start asking, like, what is AI? What's the difference between AI and machine learning?
Hmm.
Anything you want to know, you could just ask it, or you could say, create a 3-week course for me on the basic principles of AI. And every
Hmm.
time I come to you, prompt me with a new set of questions.
Right.
And it'll probe you like, what do you already know? And it'll give you, I'm a big fan of uh the one by one questioning of it. Like have it give you a one by one kind of ask me a question, let me respond, then ask me another question, I'll respond. Then at
Hmm.
the end of this, tell me what do you think I need to grow in. So it's doing continual testing instead of you taking a test. It just asks you a question, you
Yeah.
respond, da da da. And then at the end, it just says, hey, here's where you're strong. Here's where you could grow. And then you say, okay, now design a course on that for the next three
I love
weeks.
that. That's great. Yeah, like a personalized tutor, a tutor role.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many industries this is going to disrupt.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think sort of specialized knowledge is really, it's really helpful for things like you're saying with Python, like
Yeah.
teach me the basics of Python so that I can prompt you to get the things done in Python that I'd like to get done.
Right. Yeah. I know.
So it's not like you need to become a Python engineer, but you just
hmm
need to know enough about how Python works in order to then be able to prompt GPT to get the results you need.
Yep. Yep. And I love the way that you can sort of, you're talking about gaining specialized knowledge. I love the way that you can sort of frame what is important to you.
Mhm.
Because if you go and take a class with somebody, you're limited by what the teacher is going to think is important.
Yeah.
Within reason, but you can say, I'm really interested in this aspect of this topic.
Mhm.
And so, like, let's prioritize that as we're going through and you're teaching me about it. That's really cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what do I need to know in order to have this skill set?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are some things that maybe we think it's not so good at, or we've had times of frustration trying to get it to do for us?
Mm. I find with some of the generalized, like out of the box, open, you just go to Chat GPT or go to Claude or go to Gemini and you ask it a question. It's sort of like the way I feel about automation in cars. It thinks it knows more than you do.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so it pre-packages the information in a way that's not helpful. Um, and that's if you just say, it will quickly change if you start telling it that, no, that's not what I'm looking for. Here's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking for. And you have to sort of guide it and push it.
Yeah.
Um, but oftentimes, especially when they release new upgrades to the model, I find that the model is a little bit too aggressive about determining what you want it to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Say more about that. I think I know. I think I know where you're going with that. But
Well, like, okay, so we've used every version of OpenAI's model since
mm-hmm.
they started releasing it. So I have more and less favorite models. And
Yeah.
mostly I like the sort of the when the current model came out, it was overly, I don't know how to say this. It was overly like a little smarmy. Like, I know what you want. Let me tell
Yeah.
you what you want. And I had to sort of like take it down a peg or two. Like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. Thumbs
Mm-hmm.
down it, give it feedback. Like, nope, that's not my use case here. Here's my use case.
Yeah.
And then just tell it you need to be more humble.
Mm.
You need to be less aggressive. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's kind of like it's like training an animal. Sometimes
Yeah.
you have to be more aggressive to like get it to do what you want it to do.
And I think saying, don't make anything up. Ask questions,
Mhm.
or like, don't assume that you know what I want. Ask
Right.
questions for clarity. I think
Correct.
will it sort of helps with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can be over deterministic, maybe,
Yep. Yep.
where it wants to get to the final result, when really I don't even know if I know what the final result I want yet is. I want to begin this process of discovery together. So don't take me all the way to Z. Like, just let's go from A to B right now,
Yeah.
and
Slow the roll. Yep.
slow your roll. Exactly. Yeah. And then I think unfortunately, a lot of people use it for this purpose, but I think that sometimes it can just get facts wrong. Like it can
Mhm.
get, like you said, pre- the way these language models work is they're predicting the next word.
Mhm.
So it's very different from like a Google search. It just functions. It functions similarly to the end users in some ways,
Mhm.
where like you ask a question, you get an answer. But like the behind the scenes, like an LLM is totally different from a Google search query. But
Yeah.
so that's why like sometimes people will say, "Oh yeah, but it gets stuff wrong. It hallucinates." Yes, it does, and that can be a matter of what you're asking for and how and why and those kinds of things. But it does take some finesse to get it to ask the right questions in those
Yeah.
like very general searches.
I think you're right. Like it gets general principles correct.
Yeah,
Um, Specifics, if you want specifics, you
yeah,
need to give it the data set. So
yeah.
you could Google, I don't know, some piece of information that you want to know
Hmm.
and go to that web, or you could tell it, go to this website and use this website's data
Yeah,
as your data set to answering
hmm,
these questions I'm going to ask you.
right.
Um, and so that is it goes back to the skill is really
Yeah,
making sure it has a manageable size data set in order to give you sort of when you're looking for accurate answers. Like if I give it a spreadsheet and say, what's happening with this, row? Um, describe to me, describe to me the, the growth rate in row K.
yeah,
It'll give it to me very accurately.
yeah. That is good at. Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking of an example like if I said, give me 20 quotes from Napoleon, it might make some of those quotes up. But if I
Right.
said, like, give a breakdown of, what makes Napoleon's military strategy like something that whatever people talk about to this day, so then it would probably be very good at that. It would give an analysis of that in a very
Or
accurate way.
right. Or if there's an author that has like a dead author who's in public
Hmm.
domain, especially, and there's a site with all of their published works in it.
Yeah.
You can say, go to this website of Arthur Conan Doyle or something,
Yeah.
read all this material, and give me sort of the key themes that show up in his
Yeah.
works repeatedly. That is amazingly helpful
Yeah.
and really accurate. But again, you're limiting the data set even over a large amount of data,
Yeah.
and then you're limiting, like, give me the key, you know, or why do people think that Sherlock Holmes, is a protagonist or a antagonist, or, you can sort of interact with this data in all kinds of creative ways. There,
Hmm.
it's very accurate and helps prompt your thinking. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you're just asking in general for quotes, it's going to make things up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it just helps to sort of know that, for our listeners to know that like what it's good at and what it's not will save you some time and headaches, and just sort of like it can help change the way you think about topics, but I wouldn't recommend, without caution, like just relying on it 100% for factual, searches like
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, again, you're in the driver's seat.
You must
You
be.
are the you are the human. This is what you
Yes.
do. So you're using these tools and you're pulling in and you're iterating and you're creating sort of a final product, but you have to be the author of that final product.
Yeah.
Um, Even though you're using these tools and you're doing them much more rapidly than previous, you're still you bear the responsibility for that output. And I
Yeah.
think you can't cede that role to AI without it going bad at a certain
Yeah.
point. Like if you're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
letting it answer your emails, or something,
Yeah.
ultimately something's not going to connect
Hmm.
correctly. But
Right.
if you're using, like I think I've told you this before, like I use it to sort my emails into like
Yeah.
buckets, like things I should deal with immediately, things that can wait, newsletters that I'll read once a week,
Yep.
and then just sort of the pre-junk file. And so
Yep.
that saves me a lot of mental decision making on a daily basis. Because
Hmm.
really, what I need my human to do is respond to those immediate emails with the whole me. But I don't
Yeah.
need the whole me to show up for pre-junk stuff. I
Yep.
can I can cruise through 200 of those pre-junk things once a week and just get rid of them, or
Yep.
find the one thing, oh yeah, I really do want to, and I'll move it to the later file.
Right. Yep. And then again, that's coming back to the pattern recognition. It's
Hmm.
super good at seeing which emails belong in which bucket. Yeah.
Right.
Another thing I thought of was like mimicry or
Yeah.
attempting to replicate something in the style of dot dot
Right.
dot. Is very, very good at that. And that's interesting. I mean, maybe that's part of the pattern recognition.
Yeah, I mean, I even do this. So, like, I write a newsletter. We write a newsletter, and
Hmm.
so um, I have a bot that helps me refine those newsletters or generate ideas and all that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And one of the things I did recently was like asked it, what are the key benchmarks or themes or approaches that I take in writing a newsletter?
Hmm.
And it gave me like 6 key principles that are distinctive for my style of newsletter writing.
Cool.
And then I just copied those, I put it into its long-term knowledge,
Yep.
and now I'll periodically say, "Hey, I'm working on this idea for this newsletter. I want to include all of those key principles for what
I
makes
love
this a
that.
distinctive newsletter of mine.
Yeah.
Would you read this copy and make sure I've included all those?
I
And
love
if I
that.
haven't included them, prompt me with questions um, in order to be able to rewrite this in that style."
It's sort of a way of systematizing your own unique, what makes you uniquely you,
Right,
and uh, leveraging that to make your future work even smarter.
right, exactly.
Yeah, so cool. Mm.
Yeah, I think I've said, AI sort of out of the box helps you get on first base really quickly.
Mhm.
But once you start these fine tuning sort of
Yeah,
metrics to your work, it's like you get to second base right from the get go.
totally. Yeah, and if anyone listening wants to learn more about getting to second base, that definitely came out the wrong way, but but we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email, and that's what we're all about is helping our listeners really just integrate these tools and get smarter about it and make their life and their work easier. So hit us up. We'd be happy to talk about how we can help you.
Yeah, we love this. As you can tell from just our conversation, we're still learning, we're still enjoying it. We find it incredibly helpful, and we just want other people to share that journey of, especially for startups and nonprofits who are pressed for money and time and
Yep.
resources. This is really a game changer to enable you to accomplish that big vision that you have.